What up, nerds? Welcome back to the Nerdy Narrative. It's getting to be that time of year where a lot of readers are looking for a spooky read, a horror novel to scratch that itch to fit in with the change into the fall and winter months. I just finished reading one that I think would check all of your boxes, and that book is Incarnate by Richard Thomas. This novel hits the shelves on September 10th, courtesy of Podium Publishing. You will also be able to get your hands on the digital format, and there is an audiobook. I had the pleasure of reading the advanced reader's copy, and I'm here today to share my thoughts and opinions with you in hopes of helping you find your next great horror read. The majority of the time, a reader's first impression of a book is its cover, and this cover leaves absolutely no doubt about which genre it belongs to. It is hauntingly creepy. In fact, when I wasn't reading this one, I left it face down because those of you who know me, you know I don't like things that has this many legs or appendages or whatever you want to call it. The cover designer, Christina Morzik, she just did an outstanding job on this cover. And now that I've read the book, she really got the details right on this one. So I'm just going to go ahead and put that down so we don't have to look at that while I'm talking about the book. In Incarnate, Sebastian, a sin eater who has been tasked with cleansing the sins of the dead, faces a dire situation when monstrous creatures begin to invade his Arctic town through a tear in reality. In order to defeat these creatures, Sebastian must learn to harness sin itself. And so begins the battle between good and evil. And as it builds and as it intensifies, on the one side you have a monster, a mother who is fighting to save her dying land. On another, you have a young boy who is haunted by the method in which Sebastian absolves the sins of the dead, and he searches for a new path for the survival of humanity. In short, Incarnate is a redemptive story that blends nature with the supernatural and the quest for forgiveness. Being that one of our main characters is a sin eater who absolves the sins of the dead, as you can imagine, there is a lot of death in this novel. There are depictions of suicide, there's graphic violence, and there is one small portion of animal abuse. What I will say is, as dark as those things are, they really make the elements of hope and grace that much more impactful. It was absolutely beautiful. Richard Thomas took a really unique approach to the three-story act in Incarnate, at least in my opinion. The first act, which introduces the story and the inciting incident, is told from Sebastian, the Sin Eater's point of view. The second act, which is known as the rising action and introduces a second plot point, this is told from the perspective of the mother monster. And the third and final act, the conclusion, is told from a young boy named Calic. Each of these characters are striving toward a similar goal, but in different ways with varying outcomes. It was so interesting to see that, the big picture, once it's over. You don't realize, or at least I didn't, until I reached the end of the second section. When I got to the end of Mother Monster's section, that's when I started getting the idea of what was going on in this story. Sebastian's chapters had me hooked from the very beginning. Richard Thomas's atmospheric writing of this section was exceptional. His vivid descriptions of this remote mountainous region where this story is set, the nervousness and anxiety of the people that live in this Arctic town as the approaching darkness, what is known as the long dark, is coming. It's this time during winter where it's either 30 or 60 days of darkness that they have to survive through. Just brutal winter conditions. And this is why I describe this type of book as quiet horror. Snow makes everything look so beautiful. Why? because it hides things, it blankets things. And in this setting, it lends to this constant feeling of unease, that there's something just not quite right. There's something right on the edge that's just lurking, just out of sight, something sinister. Now, the second section is told from the perspective of this character called the Mother Monster. Her section of chapters were my least favorite to read about in this book. I didn't find her as compelling or interesting as Sebastian. It took me to the end of her arc to make the connection between her portion of the story and Sebastian, and to realize that her life added so much more depth to Sebastian's role as a sin eater. It took me that long to make the connection. It might not do that for you, so you might have a completely different experience and opinion about her chapters. Calic, on the other hand, was my favorite. He brought a fresh perspective to the story, his youthful hope and his willingness, his courage to risk change. And for those of you who have never had the pleasure of reading Richard Thomas's work, oh my goodness, you are in for a treat if you decide this is going to be your first read of his. There were numerous times, especially during Sebastian and Calic's chapters, where I would just have to pause reading and sit there in awe. It honestly felt like there was one particular time, I can't remember, I think it was Sebastian. No, it was Calic, where I just sat back in my chair and I just felt like I was being rewarded. And it's not purple prose, it's just beautifully written. I love Richard Thomas's writing because it makes me think. I always look beyond just the words that are on the paper. I've read numerous books about sin eaters. What makes Incarnate unique and stand out from all of those books is that this is the first time I've ever read about a sin eater who absolved the sins of the dead. Previously, all of the sin eaters I've encountered and read about, they did this for the living, and they took those sins into themselves. They ate those sins and they kept them, they carried them. In this book, Sebastian expels, he gives birth to these sins. It was so different. I was completely fascinated reading about it, but it was also absolutely horrible. This is not a calling I would want to have. With everything that I have read by Richard Thomas, this is an author that has yet to let me down. Incarnate is a book I would recommend to horror lovers that enjoy cosmic horror. Has a little bit of a Lovecraftian spin to it. If you like horror that is set in an isolated setting, set in winter, or what I call quiet horror, this is a book that belongs on your TBR. That's gonna do it for me today, y'all. Hope you enjoyed listening to this review. Hope I was able to help some of you out that was looking for a really great winter or fall horror read to get you in the mood for the spooky season. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one.